My childhood friend and also nemesis has lost his memory. He pointed at me and asked, "Who are you?" I put on my best drama queen act, pitching my voice high. "I'm your girlfriend, of course." From that moment on, Alex started acting, very strangely. It could only be described as being love-struck. As time went on, I found myself starting to notice his roommate, a campus heartthrob. But Alex Forbes, who had regained his memory, no longer mocked or made fun of me. Instead, he cornered me, gritting his teeth. "Girlfriend, are you planning to ditch me?" I had heard that Alex Forbes had lost his memory. When my best friend, Bianca, told me about it, I almost did a backflip of excitement. Alex Forbes and I had known each other for many years, but instead of calling him my childhood friend, he'd /s more like my arch-nemesis. Our rivalry went way back, starting from when we were kids. Before Alex Forbes moved in, I had been the most popular kid in the neighborhood. Aunties would call me around and give me candy, and uncles would invite me over for fresh brewed coffee. That was until one day. The Forbes family moved in. My parents dragged me over to meet the new neighbors. "Emma, come and meet your new brother Alex, /" they said. I looked at this handsome, almost absurdly pretty boy standing in front of me, and an immediate sense of competition flared up inside me. I puffed out my chest and said, "No, I don't /t want to." But Alex, smiling warmly, reached out and took my hand. "Emma, hello." Of course, the adults fawned over him, while I was scolded for being rude. That was the beginning of our rivalry. From elementary school to middle school to high school, we constantly competed against each other. As expected, Alex became more and more popular. Not only did he steal the affection of the neighborhood elders, but at school, he was like a butterfly, fluttering from one crowd to another. Whenever he appeared, I felt like I was fading into the background. And yet, he always knew how to find me in the crowd, lifting his chin and flashing me that signature smile. From what I understood, the meaning was clear. "Emma, you lost." I couldn't win against him. Even when it came to our final GPA. He beat me by 0.5. We both ended up in the same university though. Once in college, Alex and I stopped competing, mainly because we were in different departments and barely crossed paths. But occasionally, when we ran into each other on campus, he /d throw his arm around my neck, giving me a friendly greeting. Every time this happened, I had to endure the envious gazes of other girls around us. Even Bianca was convinced. "I think Alex has a thing for you." I suspected Alex was doing this on purpose. One time, I asked him, "You must have someone you like, right?" I said it with a tone of certainty. Alex raised an eyebrow, looking surprised by my question but didn't deny it. "Huh. I knew it." Alex was doing this deliberately, acting all chummy with me in front of everyone to cover up for the girl he really liked. And then, I saw that slightly mischievous smile of his. Yes, he was handsome, but his personality was just as awful. Alex had been injured in a mountain biking accident and had suffered a concussion. I bought a small bouquet of flowers and dragged Bianca along to visit him at the hospital. On the surface, it was a visit, but really, I just wanted to see how bad his memory loss was. Had he truly forgotten everything, or was he faking it? Before we entered, we overheard the doctor talking to Alex in the room. "Patient has a mild concussion. Temporary memory loss is normal, but don't /t worry, with proper rest, his memory will come back." After the doctor came out, I pushed the door and went in. Inside, besides our childhood friend Scott, there was a slightly chubby guy, who I assumed was Alex's roommate. Alex was sitting up in bed, chatting with his roommate. The sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting a soft glow on his clean, chiseled profile. When he heard the door open, Alex turned to look at us. He had a bandage wrapped around his head, and his bangs were slightly long, hanging over his eyes. Alex usually cared a lot about his image, especially his cool guy persona. His hair was always perfectly styled. I'd often mock him for being so vain. But now, seeing him like this, he looked surprisingly, well, cute. I approached carefully, holding the flowers, and called out softly, "Alex?" He didn't respond to me. Instead, he looked past me, frowning slightly, and said to Scott, "Why is Bianca here?" Did you tell her? Then he turned to me, pointing and asking, "Who are you?" I was stunned. He really did lose his memory. However, he remembered everyone else, while I was the one he had forgotten. Facing Alex, that competitive fire I had held against him since childhood flared up. But I quickly recovered, switching into full drama mode, raising my voice in a high-pitched, theatrical tone, "I'm your girlfriend." Alex stared at me for a moment. I expected him to deny it or at least question me. To my surprise, he nodded slightly, as though accepting it without protest. That's when I realized something was off. Was Alex pretending to have lost his memory? Was he using Scott to leak the news to Bianca and setting me up for a prank? I panicked, quickly trying to backtrack. "Actually, I was just kidding. We're just friends, regular friends." Alex continued to stare at me, but his gaze softened gradually, his eyes turning almost affectionate. I started to freak out. Someone, help to explain this. Bianca had always thought we were more than friends. Scott, of course, wasn't helping the situation. He shrugged and said, "Hey. Love is complicated. What do you expect me to do?" Then Alex'(s) roommate hesitated before asking, "Is that plush duck on Alex'(s) desk the gift you gave him?" I nodded, not thinking much of it. "Yes, that's mine." He clapped his hands together. "Ah, that makes sense. Alex treasures it like a jewel. He doesn't let anyone touch it." "But you're telling me you're just /friends, /? Who'(s) gonna believe that?" I was dumbfounded. When we made a bet on our graduation exam scores, I lost. As a result, I had to fulfill one of Alex's wishes. I thought he'd make me do something ridiculous, like buy him breakfast for a month. But no, he just asked for a back-to-school gift. I picked out a popular talking plush duck online, bought it and filled it with over 100 sarcastic one-liners to troll him. The next day, I handed it over without hesitation. I thought he would eventually discard it, especially after hearing the duck using my voice to mock him with phrases like "Alex is a fool." But now, hearing that Alex was treating the duck like it was precious, was there something deeper going on? His roommate seemed to catch on to my confusion and frowned. "So, you think Alex is too much of a pain now that he's lost his memory, and you don't want to take care of him anymore?" I froze. "Alex, you'd better truly have lost your memory. If I find out you're faking it, I swear, we're not done." Ever since that day, I noticed something very strange about Alex. Not only did he stop picking fights with me, but he also seemed a bit clingy. When he tried to hold my hand for the 20th time, and I quickly pulled away, I snapped, "You said you liked someone else. Think about it, it's definitely not me. If she sees this, there'll be misunderstandings." Alex looked hurt, as if I'd scolded him, and I could almost see the imaginary tail hanging down behind him like a dog's. After a long pause, he mumbled, "But my girlfriend is you." I sighed. "Alex, I really am not." Before I could finish, he gave me a look like I just rejected him. I had no choice but to swallow the rest of my words. Seeing me not protest, Alex successfully took my hand on his 21st try. The unfamiliar warmth of his palm made me pause. I kept an eye on him, now more suspicious than ever. Over the last few days, I'd observed that when Alex was around anyone else, he acted completely normal. But when it came to me, it was like someone had taken over his body. Could he be going to such extremes just to embarrass me? If that was the case, I'd have to applaud his acting skills. Well played, young man. I studied Alex's face, looking for any sign of a crack in his act. But just then, he flashed me a bewitching smile. Game over. Suddenly, an idea struck me. I raised my hand and tiptoed towards him. Seeing this, Alex lowered his head obediently, allowing me to touch his hair. His hair was much softer than I'd expected. It felt surprisingly nice to the touch. Without hesitation, I messed it up on purpose. Normally, Alex would have jumped up to slap my hand away. But now? Not a single move. He just sat there, looking, enjoying it? Still faking it. I gritted my teeth and went for the final move, speaking softly, "Alex, your bangs are getting a bit long." He nodded. Cut them. I said. Alex had always been extremely picky about his hair. There was no way he wouldn't resist. It would be the perfect moment to reveal his true colors. Just then, he calmly replied, okay. I was speechless. At this point, I started to believe Alex had really lost his memory. In the barber shop, Tony stared at Alex with gleaming eyes, eagerly asking him what kind of haircut he wanted. Alex turned to look at me, his eyes full of expectation, almost like he was asking, "Babe, what do you think?" I hesitated, testing the waters. "Buzz cut?" To my shock, Alex repeated my suggestion to Tony without a second thought. Before we left, Tony winked at me. "Your boyfriend has the best buzz cut I/V ever done." That afternoon, the sunlight filtered through the trees along the campus path, casting dappled patterns on the ground. Perhaps it was because of his new haircut, but Alex's sharp features became even more striking. There was an undeniable air of confidence and defiance about him, and he garnered the attention of more than a few girls along the way. At some point, I realized he was holding my hand, our fingers intertwined. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Under the weight of so many eyes on us, my face inexplicably heated up, and my heart started to race. I kept thinking, Alex said he liked someone else. When his memory came back, if he found out I got distracted by his looks and didn't stop him, would he mock me endlessly? No, I couldn't let that happen. This was a disaster in the making. I pulled at his hand. "Alex." "What?" "Stop holding my hand. People are looking at us." Alex released me, but before I could even breathe a sigh of relief, he suddenly bent down and leaned in close. We were inches apart. I almost forgot how to breathe, and stumbled backward, nearly tripping on the curb. Alex caught me by the waist, his eyes looking down at my face. His gaze slid down from my nose to my lips, and he paused, just staring. I saw him swallow intensively. After a long pause, his slender fingers gently poked at the dimple on my cheek. He gave a knowing look. "I get it. You don't want everyone to see." Before I could react, Alex looped his arm around my neck and pulled me into him. I could feel my entire face buried in his arm. And I mumbled, "No." Alex grinned and whispered, "This is better." His dark eyes were filled with my reflection. For a moment, I lost myself in his gaze, before finally complaining, "Alex, I can't see where I'm going." He smirked, "Don't worry, I'm guiding you." With a gentle pat on my head, he murmured, "I won/T let my dear Emma fall." It was a quiet afternoon at the dining hall. After getting my tray, I found a spot by the window and sat down. Alex sat across from me, not touching his food. Instead, he swapped our plates. "You forgot to not to put chopped almonds in your pasta. You should eat mine," he said calmly. I froze for a second. It wasn't until then that I noticed Alex had ordered the exact same pasta as mine. I was mildly allergic to almonds, though it wasn't serious, so I never bothered to mention it. But Alex had always been picky about food, refusing to eat anything with almonds. According to him, one bite and he throw up. It was one of the few things we had in common. Back in the days when my parents were away, I used to sneak over to his place for dinner. To accommodate his picky taste, there was never any almond on the table. So, when I watched Alex eat my pasta, with all those chopped almonds above, I nearly thought I'd lost my mind. "Alex, you don't eat." "Alex." A perfectly groomed girl, her makeup flawless, interrupted my words. She pulled her friend over and sat down next to Alex without hesitation. She looked at him with concern. "I heard you lost your memory. Is it serious? What if this was the girl Alex liked?" I decided to focus on my food, trying to make myself invisible. "It's fine," Alex replied curtly. "Well." The girl hesitated, then, urged by her friend, finally spoke up. "Do you remember that we planned to go to the aquarium together tomorrow?" I looked up, and our eyes met for a brief moment. The hostility in her gaze made me feel oddly guilty. I felt out of place, like I shouldn't be there. I got up and muttered, "I'm full. You guys enjoy." But before I could walk away, Alex grabbed my arm. Emma, wait a sec. He turned to the girl, his tone suddenly sharp. I may have lost my memory, but I'm not stupid. First off, I won't make plans with another girl like that. And second, speaking like that in front of my girlfriend? You're causing misunderstandings. Please explain yourself. The girl looked at him, then at me, her face turning all shades of red and pale. I must have remembered wrong, she stammered, before quickly running off, looking thoroughly embarrassed. After dinner, Alex seemed a little down. It wasn't until he dropped me off at the dormitory that he finally spoke up. Emma, why do you always push me away? Of course, it because I'm just your fake girlfriend. I was a mess on the inside, but I kept my cool on the outside. Did I do something wrong? What happened earlier was just an accident. When Alex looked at me, the usual confident and commanding presence he always carried was completely gone. All that was left was a pitiable, helpless look, like a giant dog about to be abandoned by its owner. You're overthinking, I quickly reassured him. Before I could finish, I found myself being suddenly pulled into his embrace. His strong arms wrapped around my waist, rendering me motionless. Alex buried his face in my neck, rubbing lightly against my skin, sending tingles across my body. Almost like he was being playful. I gently patted his back, trying to lighten the mood. Look at you. You're holding me so tight, even if I wanted to push you away, I couldn't. At that, his grip loosened just a little. Maybe I really am overthinking, he murmured, still keeping his head lowered. From this angle, I could see the faint scar on his forehead. I have mild asthma. The first time I had an attack was back in middle school. I was playing outside with my friends when I suddenly collapsed, gasping for air. Everyone panicked, but only Alex, quick on his feet, shielded me from an oncoming bike and ended up hitting his head. The memory hit me like a flood. Thinking back, Alex had never really targeted me, aside from the occasional harsh words. Had always been there for me, especially when my parents were too busy with work, and I would spend long stretches of time without them. The absence of familial warmth over the years created a sense of insecurity in me. To cope with those emotions, I often took it out on Alex, resenting him for no reason, treating him as an enemy, and constantly competing with him. Despite all of that, Alex never pulled away from me. Instead, he would go along with me, making it feel like everything was normal. Now that we've grown up, it felt like we had become accustomed to this pattern of interaction, and neither of us had made any effort to change it. A warm current surged in my chest. Without thinking, I reached up and touched the scar on his forehead. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect. Alex looked at me deeply, his voice soft. Emma, if I'm really as good as you say, then why can't you like me just a little more? His words dropped into my heart like a heavy stone. I was speechless. In that moment, everything seemed to click. Yes, Alex and I had grown up together, known each other for so long. It was only right that, as a way to repay him for all the care he'd shown me throughout the years, I should take good care of him while he's lost his memory and mistakenly believes I'm his girlfriend. So, for the next week. Holding hands? Sure, why not? Hugging? Alright, let's go for it. Kissing. I quickly pressed my hand to my mouth, holding him off. No. No way. He was confused, his throat tightening. But he still stopped. Why not? I awkwardly shifted the topic. By the way, Alex, I never knew you liked mountain biking. Isn't that a dangerous sport? Why did you sign up for such risky competitions? For a moment, his movements faltered. He slowly straightened up, staring at me in silence. I began to feel uneasy under his gaze, touching my cheek. What's wrong? After a while, he spoke in a low tone, it's nothing. He then pulled out his phone, as if remembering something urgent, and began typing away. I could tell something had shifted. There was an unspoken tension in the air. When Alex put his phone away, I couldn't hold back any longer. Alex, did you remember something? He shook his head, possibly realizing his expression was too serious. He flashed me a smile and took my hand again. Neither of us said anything more. The sunset painted the clouds with golden red hues, sinking slowly beneath the horizon. The sky darkened. Alex's voice was suddenly low and quiet. "Emma, do you really want me to remember?" Isn't this enough?" I hesitated, unable to answer for a moment. That night, I had a dream. In it, I saw Alex holding someone else's hand, walking farther and farther away from me. The next morning, I woke up in the dorm and found 2 new messages from Scott. The first one said, "Alex went to the hospital for a checkup." Half an hour later, the second message came, "Alex has regained his memory." I sat on my bed, staring at my phone for a long while, trying to process it. I typed and erased several messages, finally sending one after about 10 minutes. "Did Alex say anything?" I quickly got a response. "Scott. No. He's been playing basketball alone, hasn't spoken a word all morning." The past month with Alex had felt like a sudden downpour, an unexpected and overwhelming rainstorm. It had soaked through the rusted chains that once bound us, leaving us vulnerable, fragile. We'd both tacitly avoided reaching out to each other. Until 3 days later, when I went home for the break. The house was empty. My parents were still caught up in their work, flying across cities, nowhere near where I was. I had gotten used to this. After packing my things, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it. And there stood Alex, leaning against the doorframe, his head slightly lowered. He looked just like old times. "Emma, come over to my place for dinner." Maybe it was because he had just showered, but Alex smelled faintly of woodsy soap, the moisture from his hair mixing with the scent, enveloping me. His hair had grown out a bit, just like our relationship. On the surface, it seemed to be returning to its old state. But even his parents noticed something was off and joked about how we were finally not fighting. We ate in silence, and after dinner, Alex followed me outside, clearly wanting to say something. Before he could speak, I jumped in. "Just so you know, I didn't take advantage of you." He instinctively reached for my hand but stopped midway, letting out a self-deprecating laugh. "It's my fault." For some reason, hearing him say that made my heart ache. All the things I had prepared to say deflated like a balloon. I tried to act nonchalant. "Everyone goes through some tough times, right? I'm fine with it. You don't need to overthink things. This chapter is closed." Alex looked at me with those dark, mesmerizing eyes, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he didn't say anything more. I have to admit, habits are truly terrifying things. Before bed, I lay on my mattress, my eyes closing, and instantly, Alex's handsome face filled my mind. I couldn't shake off the image of him, his doting, focused expression, and the subtle, almost flirtatious desire in his eyes right before he kissed me. Tossing and turning, I found myself unable to sleep. My gaze drifted to the ceiling, an empty feeling swelling in my chest. Reaching for my phone, I texted Bianca. Bianca. I think I might need to fall in love. Do you have any good-looking guys to recommend?" "Bianca, did you break up with Alex?" "Alex and I, we really don't have anything going on." "Bianca, fine. Any standards?" I thought for a moment and typed 3 words in all seriousness, "must be handsome." Bianca was active in a ton of student organizations and had joined several clubs. As an action-oriented person, she quickly found a perfect candidate for me, Liam, an outstanding guy from our college. According to her, Liam was the campus heartthrob. Just as handsome as Alex. After exchanging contact information, Liam and I arranged to meet at the campus cafe. Liam was quiet but polite, a well-mannered gentleman. The atmosphere gradually became more relaxed, but then I caught sight of Alex outside the cafe, walking by after what looked like a basketball game. He was wearing a bright red jersey over a loose t-shirt, his toned arms clearly visible through the fabric. Suddenly, Alex looked up and met my gaze, his expression a little surprised. I instinctively looked down, avoiding his eyes. By the time I looked up again, he was already gone. It was getting late, and Liam had a class to attend, so we parted ways outside the cafe. To my surprise, I bumped into Alex again on my way back to the dorm. He was sitting on a bench along a tree-lined path, lazily playing with an almost empty bottle of water. After coldly brushing off a girl who had tried to flirt with him, he turned and noticed me. "Emma," he called out. Reluctantly, I walked over. "Alex, fancy meeting you here. What are you doing?" He casually tossed the empty bottle into a nearby trash can and replied nonchalantly. "Just finished playing basketball. I'm taking a break. What about you?" I froze for a moment, scrambling for a reply. "Oh, just expanding my horizons, meeting new people, exchanging ideas, speak in plain language." "Oh, it's a social gathering. With my roommate?" "Yes, huh?" "What? Liam's your roommate?" Alex looked at me with an incredulous expression. I glared back at him without backing down. In the end, Alex sighed, lowering his head with a quiet laugh. "Emma, aren't you being a little too harsh on me?" I didn't understand why he'd say that, but his gaze made me feel uneasy. As if I were the unfaithful partner caught red-handed in an affair. But I wasn't guilty of anything. To combat the strange emotions rising in me, I arranged to hang out with Liam that weekend. However, when the day came, things didn't go as planned. It turned into a group outing. I watched Bianca excitedly chat with Scott, both of them figuring out where to stay overnight, while I slipped away to Alex's side. "Why are you here?" I whispered to him. Alex casually took my backpack from my shoulders, rubbing my head affectionately without answering directly. "Bianca and Scott are here. So why can't I be?" he said, shrugging as if it was the most natural thing in the world. We ended up booking a villa at the foot of Mount Moxie, planning to watch the sunrise from the mountainside the next morning. That night, after we played some indoor games, Bianca mysteriously approached me, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "So, what do you think of Liam?" I answered honestly. "He's nice." Seizing the opportunity, Bianca decided to play matchmaker and organized a game of truth or dare to probe Liam's feelings for me. Unfortunately, Bianca was terrible at spinning the bottle, as it kept landing on her. Not only did she end up revealing embarrassing childhood stories, but she also had to drink several shots as penalties. Finally, when the bottle landed on Liam, he chose truth. Bianca asked him, "What do you think of Emma?" Liam replied earnestly, "I like her." When it was Alex's turn, Bianca, having no particular interest in him, casually asked him the same question. "So, Alex, what do you think of Emma?" Alex looked at me, and to my surprise, he refused to answer, choosing to take a shot instead. Bianca, perhaps a bit tipsy, raised her hands in exaggerated disbelief. "Come on, Alex, is that really so hard to answer?" She counted off on her fingers. "It's either like or dislike, love or hate." Before she could finish, Scott quickly covered her mouth, effectively cutting her off. Annoyed, Bianca began pestering Alex with all kinds of tricky questions, coaxing him into drinking even more. I couldn't watch any longer and dragged the drunken Bianca away to stop the game. When I turned back, I saw Alex still sitting on the couch, drinking by himself. I snatched the bottle from his hand and muttered, "How many secrets are you holding in that you're afraid to spill?" He looked at me quietly, his sharp features hidden in the shadows. "There are quite a few." I went to the kitchen to prepare hot ginger tea for everyone. As I worked, an inappropriate memory of Alex's lonely expression from the night before floated back into my mind. When I snapped out of it, I saw Liam had already lifted the lid of the pot, preventing the tea from boiling over. I turned around. "Thanks." He asked, "What were you thinking about?" I turned off the stove, scooping the tea into a bowl as I replied, "Just zoning out a little." "Thinking about Alex?" Caught off guard, I didn't hide it. I nodded in acknowledgement. Liam took the bowl from my hands. "It's obvious you two have a close relationship." I smiled faintly. "We grew up together. Of course we're close." Liam shook his head. "Emma, you know I didn't mean that." My smile froze, and I paused, sensing that I was about to hear something I didn't want to. "You haven't noticed, have you? Whenever Alex is around, your gaze always goes to him. It gives the feeling." I felt my heartbeat quicken, my chest tightening like a condemned prisoner awaiting execution. "It gives the feeling that no one else can get between the two of you." Liam's words were subtle, but over the past few days, I had started to notice something I couldn't ignore. I think I might have fallen for Alex. I had no idea where everyone else had gone. I brought the hot tea to the living room table, planning to call everyone to drink it, but when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I stopped. Alex was sitting on the steps, elbows resting on his knees. His long legs lazily bent. He tilted his head and looked at me with a distant gaze, slightly unfocused. I was about to go upstairs, but before I could, he grabbed my arm. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "What did Liam say to you? Did Alex see us talking?" I couldn't bring myself to tell him what Liam had said, so I simply replied, "Nothing." Alex tightened his grip, pulling me down several steps to face him. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine as he pressed, "Do you like him?" My mind was already in disarray, and where Alex's hands held me felt like it was burning. A fire traveling up to my throat. Seeing that I didn't answer, Alex suddenly stood up. I finally saw his eyes, bloodshot from alcohol. "Then what about me? What should I do?" He leaned in closer, his words sharp like a knife, but softened by an underlying ache. "Girlfriend, are you planning to leave me?" "Alex, you're drunk." I pushed him away. He didn't budge. "Maybe." I corrected him, my voice trembling. "I'm not your girlfriend." For a moment, Alex's eyes cleared, as if realizing what had said. He straightened up, not looking at me anymore. "Yeah, you're not." As my heart dropped back into place. Alex suddenly trapped me against the railing, his hands gripping both sides of my waist, holding me in place. His voice had a barely noticeable tremor. "But Emma, why are you so lenient with others, yet so harsh with me? Why won't you give me even the smallest chance?" I panicked. "Alex. Emma, what are you so afraid of?" That night, I couldn't face Alex any longer, so I ran. On the second-floor terrace, the night was still, the quiet hum of insects in the distance. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, thinking it was Alex. But it was Scott. "Emma. What's with that look on your face?" Scott walked up, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Did you and Alex have a fight?" I leaned on the terrace railing, forcing a weak smile. "Alex is a bit off tonight. Probably just from the alcohol. He'll be fine by tomorrow." But those words were more for my own comfort than the truth. Scott chuckled knowingly. "Sounds like you're misunderstanding Alex a bit." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "He's been off for quite a while now." Scott seemed to know something, and he started to tell me a story about Alex. "Did you know that Alex has a little habit?" "What habit?" "He always goes to this church alone and pray, once a year, without fail." Scott had left a while ago, but I stood there, frozen, the weight of his words sinking in. The next day, when we went to see the sunrise, my mind was elsewhere. Not far from the group, Alex sat alone on a large rock at the edge of the mountain, staring into the sky as the red clouds spread across the horizon. It seemed he didn't want to disturb me with last night's events. He had gone ahead alone, leaving the group behind, and arrived at the mountain first. I couldn't help but remember Scott's words. "I'd suggest you visit the church at the top of the mountain sometime. Maybe you'll find the answers you're looking for." That thought took hold of me with an urgency I hadn't expected. In the afternoon, I made up an excuse to part ways with the group, heading off alone toward the church. Using my memory, I found the spot where Alex had prayed before. It was an ancient tree besides the corner of the church. I spotted the carved sentence beneath the tree, the one I wrote last year for our university entrance examination. Right next to it, I noticed there was a small bottle buried below. And within it, I found a small folded note, the kind we all left with our wishes. The handwriting was familiar. When I recognized the words, my heart skipped a beat, and my breath caught in my chest. Remembering Scott's words, I reached deeper into the tree's trunk and pulled out one bottle after another, all having notes from Alex. These notes had been buried in time, its ink now dark and bold, as if it had been written just yesterday. Each note contained a wish from Alex. And they all had one thing in common, me. 5 years ago, Emma won't call me brother. But I promised her parents I'd take care of her. She has asthma and can't be exposed to any allergens. I hope she stays healthy. For years ago, Emma loves to annoy me, but I think it's kind of cute. I hope she never feels lonely. 3 years ago, I just noticed Emma's dimples when she smiles. I really want to poke them. What should I do? I hope she smiles more, and that she only smiles for me. 2 years ago, I think I've liked Emma for a long time. Long enough for everyone around us to know, except her. The next line was abruptly crossed out, but I could still make out the hidden words. I hope she likes me too. Last year, the handwriting was rushed, almost hurried. Hope Emma stays healthy and happy. With each note I read, a strange warmth blossomed in my chest. The sky quickly darkened, and the wind began to carry raindrops, crashing relentlessly against the earth. As the rain intensified, it became clear that it wouldn't be possible to descend the mountain anytime soon. I had no choice but to stay inside the church to take shelter from the storm. The downpour came suddenly, the air growing unnaturally damp. I began to feel a tightness in my chest. My breath growing shallow. With the weak phone signal, I couldn't reach anyone outside. I felt almost trapped at the mountaintop. I was afraid my asthma might act up, so I leaned against a pillar, closed my eyes, and gently rubbed my palms to calm myself. Look. There's a guy running in the rain, how dangerous. Maybe he's going here to find his girlfriend. I opened my eyes, as if sensing something. The world around me quieted. The sky had turned an eerie gray, and a dark figure appeared in the rain, rushing toward me like an old silent film. Alex, soaked through in his rain jacket, called out to me desperately, Emma. In that moment, the silence that had once gripped me seemed to break. I stood up too quickly, feeling dizzy, and Alex rushed forward to steady me. Don't move around. Is it your asthma? Breathe slowly, Emma, breathe slowly. I couldn't tell if it was tears or rain blurring my vision. Though I couldn't make out his expression, everything else about him, the grip on my arm, his heavy breathing, his anxious energy, was laid bare, unguarded, under the weight of the downpour. I clung to his jacket, inching him closer, whispering. You asked me what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid I've fallen for you. Alex froze. Realization dawned on him, and he tried to stop me. Don't say that now. Your health is the priority. But I didn't listen. I'm afraid that if we get together, like other couples do, we'll argue, and eventually break up. And then, my voice faltered, a sob catching in my throat. Then I won't be able to come over to your house for meals anymore. Emma, I just don't want to lose you easily, Alex. We had grown up together. Our bond likely stronger than most relationships in the world. But once love entered the equation, it became fragile, even brittle, something that could shatter at any moment. From my earliest, loneliest moments, Alex had been by my side. I was afraid our bond would turn fragile, that once I had him, I might lose him. The rain slowly tapered off, and my breathing began to ease. Alex gently wiped the rain from my shoulder, and with a soft laugh in my ear, he murmured, Emma, you're wrong to blame me. When did I ever argue with you? I suddenly remembered something that had almost been forgotten. Buried in the corner of my memory. Back in high school, I had gone to Alex's house for dinner. The sports channel was airing a mountain bike race. I glanced at the screen, and with a sigh, remarked that it was a sport I could never take part in. Alex turned to me and asked, Are you interested? It's not that, I replied. I just think it's pretty cool. I took a bite of my food, then asked him, Do you think only people who truly love something can push through everything to reach the finish line? Alex paused for a moment, then answered, Maybe. Now, with time bringing clarity. I couldn't help but be curious about Alex's stubborn decision to enter the mountain bike race. So I asked him about it. He rummaged through his phone's album, showing me a photo of his race completion certificate. I was shocked. But you got hurt, didn't you? He raised an eyebrow, his voice full of pride. I got back up and finished the race. I took a deep breath. You're crazy. At the time, I didn't really think about it, Alex said, his ears turning a bit red. But before the race, I made up my mind. If I finished, I'd confess to you. He looked at me seriously. His gaze unwavering. I've liked you for a long time, Emma. I'm the one who can finish to the end. The sudden confession left my face flushed, and I whispered, what if you hadn't finished? Then I'd wait longer. Another 2 years, until you liked me. I snorted softly, the corner of my mouth curling up. Who says I'd like you after 2 years? You're so full of yourself. So now, what about now? Now, what? In the church after the storm, Alex asked me, word by word, Emma, will you be my girlfriend? The sun had finally emerged outside. But the boy in front of me was shining brighter. He held out his heart, burning with passion, shattering all my doubts and fears. He ran toward me, without hesitation. For him, I was ready to make a bold choice, to choose myself, for once, without looking back. Alex. HM? I kissed him, my actions answering his question.
Alex still remembered the first time he met Emma when they were little. She wore a pink puffy coat, sitting in the snow like a soft little kitten. His father had said, Emma is half a year younger than you. She's your little sister. Mrs. Forbes had added, Emma is different from others. As her older brother, Alex, you need to protect her. Alex had watched her hide behind her parents, her big eyes peeking out from under her puffy coat. He smiled at her in a friendly manner, then, feeling it wasn't enough, imitated the adults and gave a solemn nod. Even though, at the time, he didn't fully understand Mrs. Forbes' words. That was until Emma had an asthma attack. Her face had turned pale, and she collapsed to the ground as a bike sped toward her. Without thinking, Alex threw himself in front of her, shielding her with his body. In the hospital, as a nurse was wrapping his wound, Emma had rushed to see him. If Alex had known that, upon seeing the dried blood on his forehead, Emma would cry so hard, he would have refused to meet her. That was the first time she had called him brother. At that moment, Alex had thought that maybe a little injury was worth it. But later, she stopped calling him that. It was probably around the 3rd year of middle school when Emma's parents became busier, and she was entrusted to the Forbes family to take care of. From that point on, Alex noticed Emma's eyes had grown colder toward him. She rarely interacted with him at school, and every time they crossed paths, she would find ways to annoy him. It was as if she wanted him to distance himself from her, proving that she wasn't doing well, that her parents weren't around. Or maybe he was just overthinking it. Maybe she simply didn't like him. In the first year of high school, their relationship began to thaw. One day, Emma's parents had to be away suddenly. After school, Alex naturally invited her over for dinner. As they entered, the housekeeper was chopping almonds, and without thinking, Alex blurted out, "No almonds, please." Immediately he regretted it. Just before entering, he had been bickering with Emma. He attributed these near-instinctive reactions to the time he had witnessed her first asthma attack that year. To the sound of her calling him brother. It was simply a responsibility, a duty of childhood companions. So, in a moment of awkwardness, he casually explained, "Don't think too much about it. I just throw up whenever I eat almonds." Alex thought their relationship had found a delicate balance. That things would continue as they were. But that balance was quietly shattered one ordinary Friday. He remembered waiting for Emma outside the drama club after rehearsal. She was wearing her pure white princess dress, eagerly discussing lines with her peers, even acting out parts as she spoke. Alex had secretly watched her perform before. On stage, her every movement, every expression, was full of grace, a beauty that was hard to ignore. Anyone who saw her would surely feel uplifted. Emma was, in Alex's eyes, a magical existence. She didn't need the spotlight to shine, she radiated light all on her own. When she turned to look at him, she smiled and waved, clearly in a good mood. It was as if some spell had been cast. Alex froze, a marionette moved by invisible strings, unable to stop himself from walking toward her. Just then, a boy with glasses stepped forward and blocked her path. As they walked home, Emma suddenly asked, "Alex, how many girls have confessed to you?" "I can't remember." "Why do you ask?" "Well, I got confessed to today. It was the first time someone's confessed to me." Alex had known that back in middle school, there were plenty of boys who liked her. In high school, boys from other classes had also secretly discussed her. Today, that boy, he quickly racked his brain, trying to remember his name. He was bothered by the thought, but outwardly he remained calm, asking, "So? You're not going to say anything?" she asked, shrugging. Of course, I rejected him. I'm not ready to date yet. Alex subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. As they walked, he thought about it. Even though she had rejected him, it was still her first confession. It would probably leave a lasting impression on her. That thought gnawed at him, making him feel unreasonably irritable. Even when he went to bed that night, he couldn't escape it. In his dream, Emma wore that princess dress and smiled at him, calling him brother. That brilliant, dazzling smile had completely entranced him. When he woke up, he stared at the ceiling, feeling an emptiness inside. It was then that Alex realized he was in love with Emma. The Forbes family had always had a tradition of visiting the chapel at the top of Mount Moxie to pray for blessings. As Alex flipped through the prayer slips, he realized that every wish he had written over the past few years was, without exception, about Emma. He had been unknowingly tracing the path of his own feelings all along. He had written his youthful crush on those silent pieces of paper, hidden away from the world. One day, his friend Scott had accidentally discovered the slips. Scott didn't understand why Alex had crossed out a certain line. In truth, Alex didn't understand either. It might have been that, in that moment, he felt that liking Emma didn't require her to return those feelings. More than once, Scott had teased him, saying, if you like her, then confess. There are only two possible outcomes. Secretly pining isn't your style. Liking someone in secret made him feel like he wasn't being himself. His subconscious was also terrified that after confessing, he and Emma would become awkward, unable to even stay friends. One day, Alex rubbed his scalp in frustration. Maybe I should wait. The final exams are coming up. I can't let it affect her. After the final exams, once the results were out, Alex wasted no time trying to get the details from Bianca, confirming which school Emma had applied to. When the acceptance letters came in, Emma stood in front of him, holding up the letter with the same school emblem on it, pouting slightly. Alex, what a coincidence. Yeah, what a coincidence, he replied, though in his heart, he felt that it wasn't a coincidence at all. He hadn't received any gift from Emma, so selfishly he hoped to get something from her, something to hold on to, something to think about during the quiet hours of the night. In the end, he got a talking plush duck. When the duck said, Alex is a fool, he felt both helpless and amused. He couldn't throw it away, so he placed it on his bedside table, treating it like a treasure. One day, during a big cleaning session, one of his roommates saw it. Alex, what's this? Hey, don't let anyone touch it, huh? Did your girlfriend give this to you? Alex almost denied it, but then just went along with it. The silly duck seemed to be laughing at him, but inside, Alex felt a strange sweetness. Alex had always planned to confess to Emma. His strategist, Scott, suggested he add a little ceremony to it. But on the day of the mountain bike race, an unexpected fall caused a minor head injury. Thankfully, it wasn't serious. After a hospital checkup, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something important had slipped his mind. It was as though there was a girl living in his heart all this time. When he saw Emma in the hospital room, everything clicked. He had forgotten Emma, but he hadn't forgotten how much he liked her. Almost instinctively, he wanted to be closer to her. He wanted to give her everything good in the world. But he began to notice that Emma seemed to keep pushing him away. Until one day she asked him, why did you participate in such a dangerous race? Why? In that moment, everything came rushing back to him, and he realized he had put the missing piece of the puzzle together. He was not Emma's boyfriend. It had always been one-sided. He had been in love with her from the start. Emma, being kind, had played along with his little act. Those sweet moments had been stolen, and he was greedy, unwilling to let them end. But he also didn't want Emma to feel awkward. The sunset that day was beautiful. It was probably their last time holding hands. The next day, Alex went to the hospital and asked Scott to pass on the message to Emma. He had regained his memory. In the days that followed, Alex found himself unexpectedly busy. Between preparing for the basketball match next week and rushing to the mountain bike committee to pick up his forgotten race certificate, he barely had time to breathe. By the time the weekend arrived, after a quick shower at home, he noticed that the lights across from his house hadn't turned on. Curious, he casually asked Mrs. Forbes if Emma was back. It turned out her parents were away on business. Has she come home yet? Will she feel lonely being by herself? He paced back and forth near the entrance, sighing deeply. In the end, he gave in, saying, I'll go ask Emma over for dinner. It had only been 3 days since they last saw each other, but it felt like 3 years had passed. When he saw her again, Alex could still faintly recall the feel of holding her hand, the warmth of her embrace. He didn't want their relationship to regress to where it had once been. But that wasn't something he could control anymore. Feelings, once formed, couldn't be unmade. Yet Emma seemed determined to put everything behind her. If this was what she wanted, no matter how difficult, he would respect her choice. The afternoon after the basketball match, Alex passed by a cafe and was shocked to see Emma laughing with his roommate, Liam. Liam, usually quiet and reserved, had a strange appeal that many girls liked. How did they know each other? Why were they together here? Did Emma like him? Alex didn't dare look too closely at Emma's expression, afraid that if he saw her smile, jealousy would overwhelm him. But still, he couldn't resist. He lingered on the road outside, watching. When he saw Emma, he couldn't control himself. He heard from Bianca that Emma was planning to go out with Liam alone. Alex, feeling desperate, suggested that he tag along. He justified it to himself as looking out for Emma, just keeping an eye on Liam, making sure he's the right guy for her. If Emma really liked Liam, he supposed he would have to accept it and wish her well. But when he saw Emma and Liam becoming closer, his worst fears were realized. He couldn't do it. He couldn't accept it at all. That night, during a game of truth or dare, Emma and Liam whispered to each other 5 times, and Emma smiled at him 8 times. Maybe even more. Alex felt like he was losing his mind. Even drinking couldn't offer him any relief from the crushing sense of losing control. The feeling hit its peak when he saw Emma and Liam enter the kitchen together. Liam liked her. What about Emma? Did she like him back? Would they hold hands? Would they hug? Would they kiss? Alex wanted to rush in and drag Emma out of there. He wanted to shout that he liked her, that she should look at him, or beg her to give him a chance. Maybe it was the alcohol, but he found himself leaning against the staircase rail, not knowing how long he had been sitting there. Emma came by, forced to listen to his ramblings. As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He shouldn't have pressured her. But deep down, he hoped he could find even the smallest hint that she might like him. The next morning, after watching the sunrise, Emma headed up the mountain. Back at the villa, Alex kept glancing nervously at the darkening sky, feeling uneasy. Then the rain came. The sky opened up, and heavy raindrops pelted the window with a deafening roar. Without hesitation, Alex grabbed his jacket and ran outside. The rain fell in torrents, drenching him as he ran down the increasingly slippery mountain road. His thoughts wandered back to last summer. It was the summer when both families had gone up the mountain together to pray. Just before heading down the mountain, he had stuffed a blank piece of paper into his pocket and said to his parents, "I forgot something, I'll be right back." His parents had urged him, "Hurry up." He had so many things he wanted to write on that piece of paper. Unspoken confessions. Hopes of attending the same university as Emma. Hopes for a future together, but in the end he had written only one thing. He looked out at the vast expanse of candles and felt his heart settle. If he had only one wish, one moment to make it, it would be this: I hope Emma stays healthy and happy. The end.